Good morning, everyone. Does everyone have their coffee? So, as was mentioned, my name is Bryce. I'm the Executive Director of the Keynote Museum and Archives, and really in the spirit of the whole weekend's presentations, my discussion is really going to be about collaboration, how we can all support one another, support the work we're doing in our institutions, and really be a way to create a new community for Northern museums as well. This graphic that our marketing manager at the museum found yesterday, I think, is a perfect example why we need to work together, because this is a graphic of museums in the north, which, if you look, are not anywhere near where any of these institutions actually are, so clearly not made by someone from the north, because you have Haida Museum up in Alaska. So, I mean, completely, so this is kind of it was by accident, but a perfect example of why more voices from the north are needed to kind of bring this together. So really this thesis of collaboration is all of us represent small institutions. Even the biggest of us in the north are still dwarfed by institutions in the south. And so the real strength that we have is that community feeling that we all have. So instead of us head down, just let's work through what's in front of us and kind of ignore everything else, we have a real opportunity to come together and share ideas, because there might be something that the Stewart Museum has developed last year that now Keynote we're struggling with developing this year, but we've developed something in the last few years that maybe they find relevant. So this collaborative spirit means that we're able to come together and find ways that each of us have worked on something in the past and kind of build a stronger collaborative future for ourselves that don't make us all have to spend days and days on the exact same thing, thinking that we're the only ones struggling with it. And I think last night at the dinner was a perfect example, just a random conversation, and we all seem to be having the same thoughts, the same issues, the same struggles, but if we're not in that community feeling, we just think, oh, it's just us. I'm too embarrassed to mention it to my neighboring institutions because I don't want them to think that we're not doing well, when everyone is probably feeling exactly that same way. And so talking to each other, coming to events like this and having different ways for us to share these things is really going to be helpful. So something that I think Quinn is trying to do as well with a WhatsApp group, but having things like maybe a shared Google Drive or some sort of or Dropbox or whatever software it ends up being, where we can upload things and we're done, and we can send emails to each other and say, hey, we just developed this interesting template for a school program or a policy for our institution. If anyone wants, cut and paste, you can make it your own, but it's just a way for us all to save time, and we're all, I'm sure, understaffed, underfunded, a constant struggle just to get the good things out. So if we're able to kind of help in some way, I think it's a real way for us to strengthen one another by strengthening our own institutions as well. Oh, and these pictures, just for reference, are also the all-encompassing nature of Northern BC museums, I think, is curators, collection managers, programming managers, also putting up drywall, painting, have to do everything just to kind of work within. So it's nice to kind of get that all-encompassing experience, but sometimes I think we all know if something breaks, okay, take the jacket off, let's climb up the ladder and fix that. So yeah, when it comes to the governance part, from the Keynote perspective, we had a lot of verbal agreements, a lot of this is the way it's always been done, but not necessarily a lot of paperwork to kind of back that up. My entry into the museum also was the time when most of the original staff all left, so there was a huge shift in historical knowledge at the institution, so a lot of us were coming in brand new, not a lot of overlap, and so we were having to really figure things out as we were going. When it came to policies, there were 4 or 5 that we could find that were from the early 2000s, but as you can imagine, from the early 2000s, a monumental shift has happened in our industry and just in the world in general. So we really spent the first few months of my tenure at the museum reimagining what those policies were, what we need to come up with, but like I mentioned before, probably each of you have one of those policies that we would have benefited from, but before that kind of collaborative nature came through, we just said, okay, let's just sit down and brainstorm everything we have to do. We ended up coming up with about 58 new policies for the museum, everything from dress codes to AI to accessions and de-accessioning and social media policies. So really finding a way for all of us to benefit from the work that each of our institutions are doing is a way to kind of, again, lessen the load on all of us and support one another. And even like these, it's Photos from our school programs. A lot of museums know that school programs are of a real benefit to the community, furthers our mandates, but just the idea of understanding the curriculum, coming up with these ideas is such a time-consuming aspect, whereas if one has a staff member that's really talented in the curriculum and knows how to bring these things together, is really creative in that way, we can lean on each other a little bit and take inspiration from what other institutions are doing. So the second pillar of collaboration that I think is a really unique one that we have to offer one another is the staffing paradox. Because all of us are funded mostly by smaller municipalities who, varying degrees, are supportive of heritage and museums in their communities, most of us probably are working at slightly a deficit in what we would really like to have in terms of funding. And we're in smaller communities where there isn't necessarily always the most technical of staff readily available. But for example, in Keynote, we have a really great marketing manager right now that we were lucky enough to find. She's not a full-time person, but I think all of us, even just personally, could admit we would prefer a full-time job to pay our rent and feed ourselves and feed our families. So finding a way maybe that we have a part-time marketing manager who's looking for full-time employment, but maybe in Northern BC Museum or in Stewart or in Tumbler Ridge, you're also looking for someone, can't find them and don't have the funds available or really need someone full-time. We can maybe, the Keynote Museum has this person employed, so all the benefits and taxes and everything are taken care of, but then maybe Tumbler Ridge says, oh, we need someone for one day. So then, every month there's an invoice that gets sent out and then you cover that person, and then every Monday that's your marketing manager. You have a list of things to do. That person has job security, they have the stability of having full-time employment, but then each of us are able to kind of pick when we need those resources and help to kind of bring together a more cohesive technical set instead of having, which a lot of the small museums, the manager is the electrician, the marketing, the education, the janitor, and really trying to figure out every skill within one person. And so many museums I've worked with in the past have said, I mentioned it yesterday, I meet them, they say, great, but I know I only have 2 years here. So an example of some institutions where I worked in the past, so Carr House and the Bateman Gallery in Victoria. Perfect examples of two institutions just kind of head down and working on what you're doing. Carr House desperately needed a volunteer policy, but didn't have the time to sit down and research and do all the background work of, okay, what does a volunteer policy look like? What is it that we need? Bateman Gallery had that. Then Carr House developed, I think it was, I can't remember the exact one now, but they had developed one that the Bateman Gallery needed. Likewise, at the same time, Carr House needed an admin assistant to work at the museum, but they weren't open every day. Bateman Gallery had someone, but they didn't have enough funds or need to have that person full-time. So they actually switched that person. Bateman Gallery had them for 3 days a week, and Carr House had them for 2 days. Same thing in Revelstoke. The Revelstoke Railway Museum has people on their staff that also work as a teacher in the school district. And so they're able to kind of give that stability, but really through a collaborative nature. And so it's something that we should be able to do up here. Yes, we are probably much geographically dispersed compared to someone in the Kootenays or someone down on Vancouver Island, but most of the technical work that we do as institutions, like marketing or education, could be done by remote workers because they're researching something online, they're meeting with people, they don't have to, they're sharing a front desk person, for example, would be challenging to, okay, Keynote, get in your car, drive to Tumbler Ridge for Thursday for work, that's not possible. But when it comes to education or finances or marketing, those types, those are the ones that we can really work with. And there are examples already in BC where institutions are able to bring these people together. And it's really helped the morale of the staff members as well to really give them that stability in knowing, okay, I have a job, I don't have to kind of piece together my life from all these different contracts. So it really helped in the long run for retaining those people and making sure that those technical skills are really there to support the museum in the long run. And the third pillar, I think all of us are very happy whenever we're able to get funding, but as I think all of us know, funding is getting less and less and more competitive. I don't think I've had a meeting with a single funding agency in the last few months that hasn't said it's oversubscribed, it's cut back on how much is available, and just the eligibility criteria changing, or it used to be for capital projects, now it's only for specialized equipment. So something that we've found real success in the past is, instead of every institution working and pretty much competing against each other on the same grant programs, instead of us all say it's an education program, we want to develop something to enrich the curriculum. Instead of all of our institutions going and competing for the same one, creating a unified regional program is something where there's one grant application, it's a larger sum, so it's a more cohesive look for the granting agency, but the reporting is lessened, everything in terms of logistics is lessened. But from my conversations with the people who actually sign the checks and give the money, they prefer a regional program than a singular institution putting an application, because they can show the people who sign their checks that they have a greater impact in the community. So it's not just a town of 400 people receiving $150,000, it's a region of 150,000 people that are getting 250,000, and 6 different institutions are able to fund from this. So one of the examples is we had the Vancouver Island Digital Heritage Project, where we worked with 6 different institutions across southern Vancouver Island. So instead of each of these institutions coming up with a singular grant for a project for them to create virtual content to bring their institution out into the community for people that can't visit, or in the case of Craigdare Castle, people can't get up to the other floors other than just the ground floor, they're able to come together and create something that's improving accessibility, improving promotion, improving tourism, marketing. But instead of it being each institution fighting for a little piece of that oversubscribed competitive piece of the pie, they all came together and created something where the funders were very excited about putting this together, because it was something that benefits the entire southern Vancouver Island community and really helped to drive economic growth, tourism, education as a whole, instead of individualized little projects that at the end of the day, when you put in a grant application, the people who receive that have to review every single thing you submit. So from their perspective as well, doing a regional one means they only have to read one application instead of 6, 10, 15. So it really helps them at the end of the day as well. And it's just all around something that's been beneficial. And we've heard from institutions that it's been very helpful. We've also heard from the funders that it's very helpful. So it's a no-brainer that it helps lessen the load on all of us, when the people who are giving the money also would rather us do that collaboratively as well. And all of our institutions, yes, we're from different communities and have different scopes and mandates of what we actually speak about, but there's always a commonality that we can find to have that messaging point brought together, whether it's showcasing the history of the communities in the north, or showcasing the natural history, but each of us has a little different story to tell. There's ways for us to come together and really make more of an impact for our region, even though we are such a large region. To be honest, I didn't know how big we were at the Northern BC Tourism Conference when they said Northern BC is the size of France. I didn't even know that. So it's, there is an impact and a story for us to share, but the real benefit from us coming to an event like this is meeting each other, seeing each other again, connecting, sharing those vulnerabilities of what we might be struggling on, and seeing how we can support one another, because at the end of the day, in Kitimat, we're not just telling the Kitimat story, we're telling a piece of BC's history, a piece of Canada's story. So each of us has a small part to play in that, and by coming together, we're able to bring that story to life in a more enriched, meaningful way. And at the end of the day, when it comes to administration and funding and all of that, there's only a benefit we can get by supporting one another, because we're not enemies. We're not having to compete with one another in our different communities. We're all working towards a common goal. So by having that collaborative nature, we're able to come together and really support ourselves and the industry as a whole. So I know from the conversations we had yesterday, some things were mentioned, but I mean, when it comes to policies, for example, do any of you think you have every policy or every regulation planned out for your institution, or are there things that you know or think you're struggling? Okay, I see everyone shaking their head no. So, but I mean, for something like that, do you have you reached out to other institutions and asked for help, or tried to get templates or examples from other places, or have you kind of just said, oh, we'll get to it next year when this project is done, or when we have a summer student? Which side are you guys leaning on? The ask for help or the put it off for later?
I've asked for help from, especially Baltic Valley. We're back and forth all the time. We got this, we got this, so
Okay.
exchanging some policies, some language around the website. His programs, hey, I did this, and you want more of it, and I go that one. And you don't feel competitive because we are so one. And it works really well.
Yeah, especially for the education programs. I mean, the likelihood of a class from Smithers coming up to Stewart is very likely. I mean, it would be wonderful to do it, but just with the cost of buses, I mean, that's never going to happen. So even if you have that exchange of ideas, you're not going to be taking classes away from Smithers or anything. What about anyone else?
Well, for ourselves in Old Trails Heritage Society, we have, we've developed the website. One of our volunteers is a web developer. So, we know that we can utilize our website as a regional depository for us. So we've had the conversations, but our organization has no staff. And every member comes from an understaffed, volunteer-supported organization. So we know how to do the work, we just haven't gotten to doing it. And if we have that central location, right, whether it is a Dropbox or this is your code, Tumbler Ridge, this is your code, Hudson Soap, you key in, here's your nice list of all policies and whatnot.
Yeah, and I mean, even with something like that, I mean, being completely volunteer run, I remember when I met the team from the Hazelton Museum, we were talking about some BCMA projects and different things, and they had said, oh, we've never actually received a grant before because we just don't have the capacity even to apply for one. It just takes so much. So that's not that they don't have an interesting story to tell or that people find it interesting or people visit Hazelton, it's just strictly capacity.
Yeah.
And a lot of museums have that same kind of quandary of, okay, we don't have the money to hire someone, but we need to hire someone to get the money and to help run this.
It's a hula hoop.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're in that area. So something like a regional funding application, maybe Hazelton says, okay, we'd love to take a part in it, but we don't have the capacity. Okay, great. Kidnap, maybe we have a little bit more capacity, so we can take the lead on this, but we'll add your institution in. All you have to do is give us, a letter of support or something to say that you're part of it. But then that's something that helps an institution that is just volunteer run, that is then able to do something or build capacity to have a further impact in their community. So by doing things like that, then it's only benefiting even the ones. I remember a few years ago, there was some people saying they went to, I think it was the BCMA conference, and they said it was interesting because there was a presentation by, I think it was the director of the Royal BC Museum, and he was talking about the struggles of developing a new exhibit and all the things that came along with that, and the budget for the project was $750,000, and it was a struggle. And then I was talking to someone from quite a small community. They said, I mean, it was hard to sit and feel anything for this when that's like a decade of our operating budget, or that's money we've never even dreamed of having anything near of. So I think the strength in all of us, I mean, not to say that we're all poor institutions or anything like that, but the strength of us is we're all from smaller communities, and we are farther away from the centers of the funding and government and all of that, where we know what struggles are on the ground. We're there living it every day, and we can kind of be the ones to help be that voice and support in that way. So I think the goal of what I'm trying to find from this conference and meeting all of you is really finding like-minded people that are working at all of our institutions and finding ways that we might be able to share things, whether it's good or bad, share things that will help us to develop a stronger individual institution, but then to find things where we can support institutions that, like yourself, just volunteer run. Okay, how can we do something that then you can tap into and we can kind of create something bigger together and support one another?
We come together, and I know it'll happen. Our AGM is end of this month, and we come together, and everyone's very passionate. We know the work that we need to do, and we know how we can help each other. And then yet what I see is then we generally all get back to our offices, back to our desks, and then we start dealing with this, and then we start dealing with that, and we start dealing with this.
Yeah, the momentum, you have to make sure, you have to make a
Yes.
dedicated effort to keep that going. Because I mean, every time I've gone to a conference like this, I always leave feeling like, okay, anything is possible, this is gonna be great. And then, yeah, you get back to the office and then you have 150 unread emails that you have from being away, and
Yeah.
you know, then the toilet broke, or you know, something like that. So
Yeah.
I think, you know, something like this, doing a conference once a year is great, but if we can find ways to connect on a regular basis or just check in with one another, that's a great way to kind of keep that momentum going and check in and see, you know, oh, this just happened, does anyone have a solution, or do you know someone that can help with this sort of problem, and kind of keeping that momentum going.